So let's look a little more closely at the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. So you'll notice that when you first signed in, I had you just click on begin test now, but there's actually an informational screen there that shows you what all the buttons do. And I do want to point out that right here, there's a calculator button that you probably didn't notice because you weren't doing a math test. But if you were doing a math test, that calculator button is available for you right next to the zoom in and zoom outs. And there may be other tools as well. The one thing you should know is that sometimes tools are available and sometimes they're not. So especially with the calculator, sometimes they want you to use it and sometimes they don't, in which case it won't be there. And then there was a whole lot of information that you could have scrolled through and read, but instead I had you just check out the tools and see what you could find. So let's jump into the test and make sure we understand those tools. Hopefully this took you only a few seconds to figure out how to expand and then bring it back, especially if you're getting eye fatigue, if you're feeling tired from reading all those questions on the test. It's a really good idea to expand your reading selection and zoom in so that you're working with large font, and it's just so much easier on your eyes after a day of testing. So let's zoom back out, and here we can see the questions. There I am shrinking the text for you. Let's see, I'm looking at my checklist to see what else I'm missing. I did want you to highlight, and some of these commands I think are a little funny, so I wanted to make sure you knew how to do that. That you have to highlight it, you have to actually highlight the text. By the way, this red circle is just showing up for the video. Normally you would not see a red circle around the mouse. And then I click up here on the 3 lines, and I click on the highlight selection, and that's how I do it. So I have to actually highlight the text first and then click that I want it highlighted, which is the opposite of how the strike through works. With the strike through, you have to click on strike through and then cross out an answer that you think is not correct. By the way, it's a really good tool as a test taker to think about what answers are definitely not right and just remove them so they're not distracting you. It's very easy to be a distracted test taker with all that stuff that's all over your screen there. Let's see, if I want to unstrike through, I can click on that. Let's look at my other options that are available. Yes, the notepad. What I found is that you write yourself a note, not B, and you save it, and then now you have this little note here saying that you have a note. But if you click on it, click, nothing happens. You have to come back to those 3 lines and click on Notepad to see your note again. It's kind of hidden. Don't love that, but that's how you find it now. The other thing is you can flag a question and come back to it later. And I'll talk about the coming back to later because that's an important issue. We'll get to that in a second though. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the definitions. I don't know if you can see this, but there are tiny lines around certain words. And then if you put the cursor over it, it actually turns blue. And then if you click on it, you will see the actual definition right there. Sometimes they'll do it for words that you know. Do you all know what the word store means? I do too. But how are they using it in this sentence? You'll notice that the definition, a supply of wild currants, supply is probably different than what you first think of when you think of the word store. So they do give you the specific definition for the context. That's pretty handy. They didn't define any words in the story, but they did define words in the questions. And so that's a really good way to find a little bit more meaning for you. So for example, sometimes they define phrases. Again, very useful and not immediately obvious. You need to know to look for it before you can find those definitions. Okay, let's talk about question 2. This is a tricky one. What is the author's message about the Oregon Trail? Okay, that's a pretty straightforward question. The Oregon Trail was hard, but it's not a 1-sentence answer that they're looking for. You'll notice this phrase right here, use the details from the text to support your answer. Specifically, I'm looking at that S in the word details. They want more than one detail from the text. So that means that you are going to have to quote or paraphrase two different parts of the text when you write an answer. You can't just get away with saying that it was bad and then maybe mentioning one thing in the text. So I would say that to give a really solid answer to this question, you would need to write a well-written paragraph, 4 to 5 sentences at least. You can't get away with just a sentence or two. And you do need to quote or paraphrase from the text. And yes, English conventions matter. Periods, capital letters, commas, writing incomplete sentences, spelling. You'll notice that there is no spell check. Right. They don't tell me when I make mistakes at all. You need to be your own spell checker. That's part of the test. Okay. One more little tip. When you're quoting from the text, it's a good idea to quote from different parts of the text. You don't want to take a detail here and a detail in the next sentence. You want to take one from a paragraph near the beginning and a paragraph near the end, or at least the middle and the end, or something like that. So different parts of the text really show that you read the whole thing. One more tip, still about question number 2. Here it's asking, what is the author's message? But you might have noticed that a few questions later, they ask this question: which statement best summarizes the central idea of the text? Do you think the central idea is very similar to the author's main message? I think it is. So I would look at these possible answers, figure out which answer I think is the right one. And then maybe when you're writing this paragraph in question number 2, where you'll write a real sentence, maybe paraphrase one of those answers. So obviously you're not going to be reading about the Oregon Trail and you won't have these exact questions, but you will have questions that sort of answer other questions. So it's a good idea to look through all of them. Here's another spot the test makers use to sort of trip you up. If it says select 3 options, you should have 3 different answers, even if you think only 2 are right. Part of the test is, are you reading closely and are you following directions? That is what they're looking for, amongst other things. So if it's asking for 3 options, you have to select 3. You may have noticed in years past that you have to answer all your questions before you can go on. But in a question like this, where it says select 3 options, you can check just one and it'll still let you go on, even though they're telling you to check 3. So make sure that you read those details and answer every single thing that it's asking you to do.